Welcome to the TK Show with the Athletic Bay Area's Editor-in-Chief, Tim Kawakami.
Hey everybody, Tim Kawakami here, TK Show, live on recording from the Courtyard Marriott downtown Oakland, the famous lounge of the Courtyard Marriott. Really good to have on as my guest today, my friend from long time ago, and journalist, ESPN star, and now director of the sports journalism at Northwestern, Medill School of, what is it now, Jay? I can't.
Medill School of Journalism, Media, and Integrated Marketing Communication.
There you go. They added up a lot of different names since you and I were there.
They have added a lot, yes.
But again,
they've added a new building. They've added multiple campuses, actually. A lot has changed since we were there.
I can't even imagine. It's Jay Adande. If you don't know that voice, you probably knew that by now. Great to have you on, Jay. Well, first I'm going to say that we brought on Jay to write for us in a very special piece, the Athletic Bay Area Persons of the Year, co-winners for the inaugural award, Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. You talked to both of them. You wrote the piece, great piece. What was your reaction just talking to those guys? It was clearly about each other, about the shared kind of responsibility, how this all happened. What struck you while you were talking to Durant and Curry for this piece?
Well, it wound up kind of being the theme of the story was just how it's weird. It wasn't contrarian, it wasn't combative, but they basically took a different tact to every premise that I had out there, and also or created alternative tacts that I hadn't even thought of that didn't necessarily counter me, but countered the conventional wisdom. For example, one of the primary thoughts that I had was a reason that they were successful in melding themselves together and forming that tandem is that they each had MVP awards already. So they'd already gotten their individual glory. So there was no need for them to try to assert alpha maleness or show their dominance and how they could be a dominant player in the league. They'd already been recognized as such twice for Curry. And so I thought that was an important component that made their partnership work. And they both kind of discounted that or said that it never even entered their mind, which was interesting. And again, they didn't do so in a combative way, but, they really shot down every premise I had for that, for example. And that was one of my primary thoughts going in. Another thing was the notion from Durant that he actually respected Steph Curry's journey and his path to the league, in which I think and a lot of Marcus Thompson's reporting has indicated that a lot of people feel that he didn't have a hard journey, and he didn't take the same path because his father did play in the league, and because he grew up in a rich environment, as opposed to a lot of people that come to the league and have to fight their way out of poverty or difficult situations. I felt like LeBron James really tried to emphasize that difference during the finals, particularly in 2016.
Yep.
He kept talking up how he related to Tyronn Lue because, they came from the same type of background and, nothing was expected of them, all this stuff. And I feel like Curry has taken that as a shot and felt a little disconnected maybe from the rest of the NBA in that regard. But Kevin Durant flipped that, and he said, you know what? He had it hard. I respect the path that Steph Curry took because you don't see a lot of players who played in the league, their kids playing in the league. He said it's tough having that. In some ways it's hard to work as hard as Steph Curry does when you have a life of privilege, right? You don't have the incentives. It's easy to just take the path of least resistance because you've never had to encounter difficulty and things have always worked out great for you. So I thought that was an interesting tip. So that was my main takeaway and kind of the theme I tried to put into the story was that maybe the premises and the way that you think about it, the assumptions, even some of the positive assumptions that you might have about this duo and the way they function really have nothing to do with the way that they think and the approach that they took to it.
One part that really struck me was when you're talking to Durant about what he was thinking about his role might be when he came to the Warriors. He brings up Nazr Muhammad and other role players, deflections and hustle, and I think block shots, whatever he was saying. Did that jump out to you? And do you think he really was thinking that? Oh, now I could be, Scottie Pippen. Now I can be, a Draymond Green-like player.
Yeah, and part of the quotes I didn't include was he said, he'd already been in that position where, the coach is drawing up plays for you with the game on the line. He'd had all that. And I think he understood he could go back to that, that there would be times for that. And I think we saw early on, his first year with the Warriors, he kind of became the go-to guy in the fourth quarter. And then certainly these last couple of weeks with Steph Curry out with the ankle injury, we've definitely seen him carry the team as he did some nights in Oklahoma City. So I think he felt confident that he could always do that if needed, if called upon. But I generally think he was curious about, okay, how can I, be known and be recognized for other aspects of the game? And you're seeing that come to fruition, especially this season, I think, especially with Draymond Green out. So we've seen him take on the offensive responsibility with Steph out. But I think he's starting to get recognition for taking on the defensive responsibility without Draymond Green. And you're hearing some buzz for him as a possible defensive player of the year.
Yep.
So I think that's very satisfying to him. And I think that would be kind of be mission accomplished. If he were to do that, I think in some way that would mean as much to him as getting that Bill Russell Finals MVP award in the championship, because this is something that he's tried to enhance in his game, and he's starting to be recognized for it, which maybe doesn't happen if he'd still been in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, how many players have ever done that? And season MVP, Finals MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe Jordan.
Yeah, I think you're in that Jordan territory.
I guess Russell would have won it if they had the Defensive Player. Yeah.
Yes. And if they had the Bill Russell MVP award,
if Bill Russell could win his own award, it's not. You're talking about 3 or 4 people in the history of the league, maybe. Interesting point here, and I think we could bring up here, since I was part of the voting for this, and Jay, you were a writer for it, but we had the senior staff, myself, Marcus Thompson, Jimmy Durkin, vote on this, and we were, it was basically a tie. And we were trying to figure out how this was going. We were going to allot it, and was it going to be Curry or was it going to be Durant? How we're going to do this? And basically, Curry made it be known that he wasn't going to participate in it unless it was with a teammate, specifically Kevin Durant, which I think is really interesting. Did any of that come up in your conversation with him, or was that just kind of assumed when you were talking to Curry that he didn't want to be it by himself? He wanted to be it with Durant. He wanted to share this.
Yeah, I had. It's interesting because I was aware of the negotiations that you guys are doing, and shout out to you and Marcus and Ray Ritter and everyone who made this happen.
Yes.
It took a while to get Steph Curry, but I finally got.
He got hurt in the middle of it too. We should say that complicated.
That hurt,
I kept emailing.
Had him a few days earlier.
Yeah, Jay.
The trip, and
Jay, you got him yet? What can we do? But it was interesting that he wanted to do it only if it was him and somebody else, which I think is telling about the personality.
I think so too, and it's weird because I think one of the reasons they both did wind up talking, and I think some of the quotes were so good is because they were talking about each other. Players are much better talking about other things and other people than they are about themselves. I think that was actually an underrated aspect of Michael Jordan, was his ability to kind of put his greatness into proper perspective, which is not as easy as it sounds. When you're constantly being asked, how great are you? Are you one of the greatest of all time? Blah, 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 are you the best? Like, he was literally asked one time, are you a god? He's been asked, can you fly? All these crazy questions. And Michael developed a good way of dealing with that. I think actually Steph Curry is pretty good, too, about talking about his unique place in the NBA. But players don't like to talk about themselves too much. So I actually avoided Steph Curry asking him to talk about why he didn't want this to just be about himself, because then it'd be talking about himself again, right? So it was kind of weird because I actually thought he was at his best talking about Kevin Durant in that piece when he was talking about the respect he had always held for him from afar. They both talked, I'm not sure I really made the story, both talked about how much more respect they gained for each other, seeing the work ethic up close when, Steph Curry saw what made Kevin Durant an MVP and Kevin Durant saw what made Steph Curry an MVP. So players are always, and this is interviewing Tim, if I can slip into professor mode for a moment, to get people to talk about what interests them or things that are outside themselves. As egocentric as athletes are, they're actually better talking about things that interest them rather than themselves.
Absolutely, and then it informs who they are. Also, it's that sly way of let's talk about something else, but it also informs me about you because it's what you're interested in. So
Exactly.
It's all a little secret sauce here. Well, I got to ask you before we get into Northwestern stuff. Kobe Bryant has the double jersey number retirement in L.A. Pretty impressive. I was hit by just Bill Russell, Jerry, all the Iverson shows up. Slava Medvedev shows up, which had to impress everybody. Just the feeling of history on the court there, I think it hit Kobe too. What did you take away from that? Obviously, it lasted about 17 hours at halftime, but it was worth it. I mean, I know people were laughing about it, but if you're going to do a 28-minute halftime, that's the way you ought to do it. As someone, you were there with him, near the beginning, all the way through all the combustible times. You know him real well. What did you take away from that ceremony, from that whole day?
Well, it's interesting how among his successes is how he has shaped the narrative about himself. And I think a lot of the last season was about that. The fact they played that 5-minute video that was produced by him at the outset of the, was that really necessary? We're dedicating this halftime to honoring you. All the people that you mentioned are there. Magic Johnson paid a tremendous tribute to him, called him the greatest Laker ever, which means a lot coming from Magic Johnson.
Yep.
Jeannie Buss with her tearful tribute, all that stuff, the 2 jerseys going up. And on top of that, they had to start it with the Kobe Bryant produced 5-minute tribute to Kobe Bryant.
Yep.
But I think that's kind of reflective of, his willpower. And one thing about him is he does just kind of wears you down when you're around him. He kind of imposes in some way. We fought and battled for a while, and I just remember kind of reaching this breaking point 2 years ago where I realized, what? Bill Jackson couldn't change his mindset. Who am I to change his mindset? And then I had written a column about, how he needs to involve his teammates more. The eternal battle with Kobe Bryant, right? Is he going to try to do it on his own? Or is he going to try to do it within the framework of a team? And we wound up having like a good 15-minute argument, in the locker room. Wasn't, heated, jaw to just, nose to nose, but, we kind of got into it. It was just the two of us and Mike Wilbon. Like the rest of the locker room had emptied out after game one time, arguing back and forth. And like he was, I had the statistics to back me up and everything. And he actually came with his statistics. One of the points he wanted to make was, okay, how many shots did Pau Gasol average when he was in Memphis? And I didn't know the number, but Kobe gave it to me, and then he said, how many is he averaging now? And the interesting thing is Kobe Pau averaged the same amount of shots in Memphis as he did playing with Kobe. So Kobe's thing was, and how many does he average in the games in which I'm not playing? And that number was about the same. So Kobe's point was, hey, if these guys want shots, they got to come get the ball from me. And these aren't guys who are prone to demand the ball with or without me. So don't put it on me to force feed them the ball. So I thought it was interesting that he even researched the numbers.
Yep.
Like that to prove his point. But you know what? I'm not going to change. Nobody's going to change his mindset.
Well, maybe Plaschke. Plaschke, I'm sure had the best shot.
But it just was reflective of how imposing and it's not physically intimidating. It's just he just really wore people down. And he kind of made it his way. And he and I had our battles over the years. And on the night he announced he was going to retire through that Player Tribune piece, and then he had a press conference after the game as we walked out. And this was kind of the piece and the amends I made with Kobe the last couple of years. I said, you know what? He always made it interesting. And as a sports columnist in L.A., what more could we ask for than Kobe Bryant's career? Which I had 10 years as a sports columnist, and and then even covering the NBA out of Los Angeles for ESPN. I had Kobe Bryant as a topic and a subject, and he always made it interesting, right? And I'd go beyond that. I'd say fascinating. He's one of the fascinating characters that we've had in the NBA. So I appreciated that. And I came to just enjoy it, as stubborn as he can be, as frustrating as it could be. He would kind of defy the basketball gods and all that. He was fascinating in his determination, in his later years, and his kind of when he became the old, cynical, smarmy, old guy on the porch, talking about these young kids playing in the front yard. That was kind of fun too. But he had perspective, and he put in the work, and he studied those who came before him. So he became a great resource in his last few years too, just because he could. And as I spoke about earlier, the ability to talk about your own greatness, he developed that as well, and his ability to put himself in the place of where he is in the NBA, his role in making the NBA what it is today, all of that. He became a great resource, and so it was kind of fun to have that back and to tap back into that. And in the round of interviews and media that he did ahead of this jersey retirement, it's interesting to hear from him, right? And that's what these last 5-6 years of Kobe were. It was interesting to hear his perspective. As he became less interesting to watch on the court, he became more fascinating to talk to.
All right. Well, what do you think he does now? Where does he land? I don't know that he's going to be. Well, I don't think he's going to be a coach. Does he want to be an executive? Does he want to be an owner? Does he want to not be in basketball? Although I find it hard to believe that he's not going to try to be in basketball in some way.
In the NBA level, he doesn't have the money to have the amount of control that he would need in the NBA, I think. So maybe he, and he did invest in, didn't he own a team in Italy?
Yeah.
Wow. And, I could see him owning an MLS team or something like that. If the price point for an NBA or NFL team is going to be $2 billion, he can't play at that level. So, I just see him doing something maybe on a smaller scale, but where he has more control, because he's not going to be in position to come in and run the Lakers. I think he had some influence. He exerts some through his former agent, Rob Pelinka, being the general manager now. So he has some influence, but I think if he's going to have his name formally attached to something, I think it's going to be in a position where he can exert complete control. So maybe it's a different sport, a smaller sport, where he can really be the principal owner.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about your move into academia. Macadamia, whatever the word. Yeah.
Academia.
You left ESPN and you took the big step after some time. I know we were kind of doing both jobs. Easy decision when it came down to it, and what's it been like? What's that world like if you're when you're fully into it? When you're teaching, when you're a professor, when you're not having to write a story or do sideline reports 3-4 times a week.
Yeah, it wasn't as hard a decision as I thought it would be. I don't miss what I was doing for 25 years as much. It's funny, just writing the story even for The Athletic reminds me, just the frustration of waiting and trying to get Steph Curry on the phone. I thought, God, I don't need this anymore in my life. That's one nice thing about my life now is I don't need to try to catch up with athletes on the phone or wait, an hour after practice for them to come out of treatment so I can talk to them for 2 minutes, all that stuff. I always say sports writing, a lot of it is waiting around for people that don't want to talk to you. That's the core of the job, and you have to be willing to exert those hours. You put in that time when I was with you at the old Lakers practice facility. In El Segundo, waiting in that hallway, waiting in that small room for the door to open up, and maybe Kobe'd been there, maybe he wouldn't. Maybe Shaq would talk to us, maybe he wouldn't.
And maybe we've got to sprint to the parking lot to see if they're pulling out and try to stop them.
Exactly, all those things. So I don't miss any of those aspects. I don't know. I don't need the attention. I always said writing isn't fun. Being published is fun. Having your name there and having people respond to what you've written, that was always the enjoyable part to me. I don't miss that as much anymore. It's different now where if I need to say anything, I can always send out a tweet, and if I want to engage with people, I can do it that way in social media. So that's helped mitigate that change in my life. I love the aspects of creating a curriculum, creating a lecture. I've come to think of my lectures; those are my columns now. When I'm crafting a lecture, okay, what am I going to say for an hour and a half? That's kind of like preparing a show or writing a column. And the rewarding aspect is placement. We had one of my grad students, for example, just got a job with the White Sox in 1-year internship, 1-season internship, I guess I should call it. And he was excited, and he was appreciative and thankful for the help that we did to put him in that position. So it's tremendously satisfying. It's funny, I heard from one of my students, he actually interviewed me for the rap, one of my students at USC, called up and say, "Hey, professor, I had your class, and I'm doing this story." He's actually doing something on John Skipper and ESPN, and he wanted my perspective. It's fun to see the people that you taught pursuing their dreams. I get a lot more excitement out of seeing them. Those last few years, if I was at a game and I saw one of my students or former students there, they were excited. Like that, I actually tallied it up recently. Probably more than 1,000 NBA games I've done, well over 1,000. Probably closer to 1,200. I think I went on the conservative side. 1,200 NBA games that I've done. That's plenty. It seems to be becoming as thrilling, as exciting. The excitement of being in close proximity to the core of these players. It's not as fun as it once was. But when people are doing it and it's new and it's fresh and it's maybe their first opportunity to do that, you can see the excitement in their faces. When I might take them for a school project or something like that. That makes me excited, more so than doing it myself, seeing the opportunities that they have to do it when it's new and it's something that they wanted to do and now they're getting a chance to do it. That makes it thrilling for me.
What's it like to be back on campus? The old school, does it... I think about that. Like, that'd be weird, just be walking around that campus and see some of the old buildings and feel like
it's
you're
great,
like you're 20 again.
Well, I don't, because the students are so much younger.
Yep, that's true.
First hit me a few years ago at USC when I realized, okay, even the seniors are half my age.
Yep.
And then the fact, Tim, that the students who are there now weren't alive when you and I were on campus.
That's true.
is jarring. So if I think about then and now, it's very sobering. Another aspect of what I've realized, and it's kind of helped shape my philosophy on what college should be, a lot of my failures were there. Both the stupid mistakes I made, falling off my bike, dumb attempts I made trying to get women to date me, places I was rejected, all this stuff. But I came to realize college should be a time for failure because the consequences aren't great. If you fail in college, it's really not that big of a setback. If you mess up, the famous Medill F, if you fail a paper because or a project or because you had a factual error, you get an F. That's Medill tradition. And so, but that's the time to get it. And the reason they do that is to instill that pit in your stomach when you do get that F. And mistakes they happen, but they should feel intolerable to you. And you want to instill that in people. But again, you'd rather fail at something an assignment for your class than get a factual error and a report for the Washington Post or the LA Times, right? Much greater consequences then. So, this notion that it's okay to fail, it's a time to fail, I want to encourage my students to fail. Because if college is a place of your greatest success, then you're doing life wrong. You shouldn't be peaking at 21, 22, 23. I don't look back on college as like, oh yeah, these are the glory days. I don't buy into that best time of my life. The best time of my life was maybe the first 2 years out of college when I was college age, but I was getting paid, and I didn't have homework when I got home. Those were the best years of your life. This myth that college is the best 4 years of your life. No. College is a time to fail. It's a time of diminished consequences, but it's a time to experiment and to grow and to socialize as well.
Well, let's skip over here a little bit to John Skipper. I know you knew him. You worked for him at ESPN. A huge reputation, major part of everything that ESPN has done editorial for years. What were your thoughts when you heard that he was retiring, when he was leaving, and what kind of impact did he have on you, maybe personally?
Yeah, my thoughts were sad and scary. I wouldn't necessarily say tremendous personal impact or loss, especially the fact I'm not there anymore, but I always felt confident that he believed in me. He had a way of making you feel that. And if you looked at a lot of the tributes and testimonials that came into him on social media from ESPN, primarily the ESPN talent, were very outspoken on that. I think the common thread was that this was a man who cared, who genuinely cared about the individuals at the company in addition to caring about the company and the way it was perceived. And we had conversations. He wanted to get it. His intentions were always good. Maybe he didn't always get it right. Remember the controversial partnership that ESPN formed with Barry Bonds. They were going to do a show with him involving the home run chase, and they got a lot of pushback on that, and I think they dropped it. And I remember he asked me about it. He said, "What do you think? What did you think?" And I told him, I said, "I don't think it was a good idea to be partnering with him." He wanted my honest opinion. I gave it to him. He said, okay, he definitely saw the drawbacks to it, but I think he thought it would be good content. And remember, his title before he was the president of ESPN, he was the vice president of content. So he was always looking for great content. The other thing about him, why he's so revered by so many people in the company, is the push for diversity. ESPN looks like sports fandom. It sounds like sports fandom. It reflects sports fandom, and it reflects America, because it is a diverse place. You increasingly heard women's voices in prominent roles, and this was something that he prioritized, that he emphasized. And will the next person consider it that important? What's the future of the undefeated? This was a John Skipper project that had his fingerprints all over it, and that was of great importance to him, a priority to him. And will the next leader of ESPN be willing to take on something that's not going to be a huge profit maker, probably a money loser, but it's something that makes it a more inclusive place? You get perspectives there that weren't available in such a large platform as they were, with the association with the ESPN brand. And it was very important to him that we did have that perspective. So there's that fear of the unknown. He didn't have the greatest year. Obviously there were some mistakes and errors along the way this year in particular. But you always felt good, not just knew, you felt good about what the intentions were. And I think now there's a sense of, okay, what's going to come next, and what will it mean for some of the places that were John Skipper priorities that might not necessarily be priorities of the company moving forward.
All right, Jay, that's great stuff. I will end this with the question I ask everybody on my show, and my producer makes sure I ask it, which I appreciate. Jay Adande, missed man of many different cities. You've been everywhere. What's your favorite restaurant?
This won't be the most original answer that you hear. You've probably gotten it before, but I have to go with Prime 112 in Miami.
Okay, I don't think we've got that one. Go ahead. Tell us about it.
You haven't been talking to enough people. The only reason that hasn't come up before is you haven't talked to enough people from there. But anyone who spent, especially those 4 years that the Heat were in the finals, thanks to LeBron James, Prime 112 is a fixture. All the athletes go. Actually, I interviewed Pat Riley in Prime 112 after the first Heat championship in, was it 2012? And he came walking in about 1:30 in the morning. I think he'd had some celebratory champagne. And I stopped him. I said, Pat, I need something on the record. I made it clear, I wasn't going to sneak this in. I was like, Pat, I need you on the record. Clear, this is for ESPN. And he starts going into this whole thing about, forgive us for the decision, forgive us for the celebration of a young man saying, not one, not two, not three, for being over exuberant. It was this whole weird thing, and you can go back and dig it up. But one of the great Prime 112 ones. You never knew. Put it this way: at Prime 112, I got to say the line, "If you need me, I'll be over at the bar talking to Stephon Marbury." I said that once. A legitimate excuse to say that at Prime 112. Pedro Martinez, I've had drinks with him there. All the celebrities come through there. During the Super Bowl in Miami, I think it was Super Bowl 41, it was like the Hall of Fame in there, like John Elway, Joe Namath. Funny, LeBron was in town his last year with Cleveland. He had a table. Everyone but Peyton Manning, like the whole Manning family was down there. He was getting ready to play in the game. His dad was there, his wife. It's an incredible scene, and the food is great. The steaks, of course, bone-in filet. My favorite thing on the menu, I want to call it the vanilla sweet potato mash or vanilla bean sweet potato mash. It's like a side dish / dessert. It's outstanding. So can't say enough about Prime 112. My favorite restaurant of anywhere.
Way to go. By the way, for 3 straight years, I've had Cleveland, so we just got fine restaurants, but Red Steakhouse has been where I went and saw Ty Lue was there eating there once with me, but that's the only comparison. So you've got me on that.
There's one steakhouse that was pretty good.
Reds.
But it ain't Prime 112.
Yep.
They don't have anything close to Prime 112 there. So, yeah, got 3 years in a row, Cleveland. I mean, we got to mix it up somehow this year, right?
I wouldn't mind.
Toronto?
I wouldn't. Boston would be just fine. All right, Jay, listen, thank you very much. Taking up your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for writing that story for us, by the way.
Thank you for assigning to me. It was fun to blow off the dust and become a writer again for a little bit. That was my first thing I've done, or actually the second thing I've done, but first in a while. So it was a lot of fun. And thanks for hosting my work on The Athletic and for all you're doing with your fine wetback. Congratulations.
We'll appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get you writing again. That's my hope. All right,
everybody.
Jay Adande. Thanks. That's the show for today. See you.